Hello viewers, a pleasant good afternoon. You're watching 284 News live and direct out of Tortola in the beautiful British Virgin Islands. 2020 has been by far perhaps one of the most challenging years, not only for individuals and families, but for countries and states all across the world. At the end of the events of 2020, we have a keen opportunity as a territory to reflect on this past year in order to chart the course moving forward. Here in the British Virgin Islands, we too have seen our share of highs and lows. Now, with this in mind, it is once again our absolute pleasure as your reporters to bring you our annual 284 News Year of Local News in Review. I'm sure some of you and some of these stories you might have forgotten, yet they serve as an integral part of our history.
Now, Ron, what a year 2020 has been indeed. As you said, highs and lows. But, you know, it's definitely a pleasure to sit here today in this chair and go through some of those notable stories. Definitely, it's been a small win, a big win to be here at the end of 2020. Some persons have lost their lives because of the novel coronavirus. But we are here today and we are thankful, viewers, to be here to bring you our top 15 local stories of 2020 right here in Tortola, British Virgin Islands. But viewers, we'll be right back after a short commercial break, so make sure you stick with us. We are 284 News and we'll be right back.
The win! Oh!
What the hell are you?
I'm freaking out!
Is time.
284 News
Coming to you live and direct from the beautiful British Virgin Islands.
What's poppin', what's really good, what's happening, what's up?
Davis has won it for the
Viewers, welcome back. I'm Ron Grant.
And I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes.
Here are our top 15 local stories for 2020 in Tortola, British Virgin Islands, of course, in no particular order. Our 284 Media Year in Review. Number 15. Leader of Government Business, the Honorable Andrew A. Foy, expressed shock over a leaked letter penned by him to Baroness Elizabeth G. Sugg, the United Kingdom Minister for Overseas Territories and Sustainable Development at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, over the conduct of outgoing Governor Augustus J.U. Jasper. Now, Premier Foy stated the letter covered in its entirety by our agency was a confidential correspondence with the UK and that he had no clue, he said, how such a high-profile letter could have been leaked. In the letter, Premier Foy told Sugg on September 25th that he was dissatisfied and outraged with the hijacking of the territory's sea border by Governor Augustus J.U. Jasper. Now, the Premier Foy said in the government's decision, and that it was made, on the grossly inaccurate. The governor's decision was made on the grossly inaccurate and exaggerated misinterpretation, which was a quote from him, of the capabilities of the VI's resources to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Jasper intentions to deliberately bulldoze the elected government is peculiarly clear. That was the quote by Honorable Leader of Government Business, the Honorable Andrew A. Foy, in his very stern letter to Baroness Sugg, who has now since, of course, resigned. But this was the Premier's stance, and he said what he said, and he stood by it.
Yeah, that was some strong words and really a strong stance to take. And we remember when our local opposition actually spoke out against it
and distanced themselves.
Yeah, and distanced themselves from it. So that was a big deal, and it really brings us into number 14. Governor versus the VIP government. Now, assenting the various bills, the UK assisting in border protection, governor stating that there is organized crime and corruption as well as victimization by the government, swearing in of a new governor. Now, Ron, so much back and forth.
Too much back and forth. Let's just say that.
So much back and forth between our governor right now, Augustus J.U. Jasper, and our premier or Foy-led government. It's been a lot of back and forth and
as
a lot
well
of
as the
friction.
speaker, the governor and the speaker.
Yeah, a lot of friction between the House and the governor. We've seen it all year, and as you said, I just think it's been too much.
It's not only been too much, but I think it obviously took away from productivity. One of the things that we saw with our governor, Augustus J.U. Jaspert, who is outgoing, obviously, is a lot of the concerns that he's raised, speaking about victimization, organized crime. This has come on the heels of his exit,
Right.
and it beckons the call. Why now? What's the point? What are you trying to accomplish when you speak about persons speaking up? Now that you're leaving,
Why now?
what is the point?
Do you think that this has been escalated due to COVID-19 this year, maybe?
COVID-19 definitely had a role to play with it, but I think when we think of good governance and accountability, which the Foy-led administration has spoke so highly of, I think iron sharpens iron. So I do see where Governor Jaspert, in his capacity, needed to put the metal to the pedal and really
Right.
push on certain issues. But at the end of the day, I think it essentially showed both organizations or offices, rather, the governor's office and the premier of the Virgin Islands. I think it showed their office in not the best light.
Agreed.
The tit for tat.
I agree.
Yes. One of the very daunting stories, this is number 13, Junior Peters, a Jamaican living in the BVI, was last seen in the Horse Path area of Tortola on Saturday, June 27. Now, after being reported missing and days of searching, he was found dead a week later. The 50-year-old landscaper was an employee of the government house, and Governor Jaspert single-handedly led a search that led searchers to the body of Junior Peters. Now, autopsy reports did come back, and they did not report any foul play. Kyla, this was definitely one of the most unnerving stories and tragic stories. One of the things that I think it really put into perspective is the level of humanity. One of the things that we saw with this story is Governor Jaspert, and I'm going to say it publicly, single-handedly led the search for his employee. You and I and Jovan sat and we were wondering, well, where are the missing persons posters? Why have we not heard anything from the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force? And it was not until, if we're very honest, it was not until the governor came forth and really led the search that movement started to happen. And not only that, I will tell you from personal experience, on the site of the scene, he was there literally making sure that persons did what they were supposed to do. He walked through the bushes, he got the kusha,
Yes, we saw.
and we saw he had the bruises, but he was adamant that he was not going to leave until the body of Mr. Peters was recovered, and that we see. And I think it's important that as leaders, we take on this level of leadership, no matter how uncomfortable the situation might be in. And in the final analysis, a life was lost, and we still don't have clarity on what exactly took place.
I think at that point, we really saw that human side of our governor, Augustus J.U. Jaspert. As you said, he led the search, and as you said, it was very surprising, but we saw a different side of him as he led that search, not just in commentary, but literally going out there and getting dirty.
Absolutely.
And we definitely want to extend our condolences once again to the family of Junior Peters. Now at number 12, if we remember when the BVI basically led and stood in solidarity with the worldwide Black Lives Matter movement. Now on June 20th, BVI residents led by the youth marched peacefully in conjunction with the Kneel With Me movement. The protest began at the Nobel Lloyd Park to the Queen Elizabeth Park. Now, our newsroom was present on that day and spoke to one of the organizers of this protest, Mr. Nicoy Hendrickson. In an invited comment, Mr. Hendrickson explained, and I quote, "We feel as though a demonstration is necessary in the BVI, not only for George Floyd, but against racial injustices in America, our home and the world moreover. The march say support from the persons of all that walks of life include government officials and Governor Jaspert." I remember I was on the scene, you were on the scene, Javon was on the scene. We went out in numbers to this march, and as we saw most government officials in plain clothes just out and walking in solidarity for what was really happening in the world at that time and continues to happen. And it's very sad to see, but I was very proud to see our country, although we don't really deal with this on a daily basis in the BVI, we stand in solidarity.
I'm happy to say that we don't technically deal with it because one of the concerns that we raised were raised locally and regionally. You had a lot of persons saying, you know, why are you picking up this argument? Why are you speaking about it? But at the end of the day, and I think Mr. Hendrickson in his opening remark spoke very highly of it and brought it into perspective. This only or would have only become an issue if one of our Virgin Islanders, one of our local black men or women were gunned down in the United States. And I think at the end of the day, that really brought it home to solidarity. So persons really understood the significance of this movement. While we are not in the U.S., we do have students, family, friends who are living and residing in the United States who could fall victim very easily to this type of behavior.
I do agree. Now at number 11, Ron.
Yes, we have expats versus local, a very uncomfortable conversation that has taken 2020 by storm for a variety of reasons. We have, of course, the global pandemic, COVID-19, where persons of different ethnicities were being blamed for bringing the virus in. And this unwarranted argument, I would say, really took on a life of its own, where we see you know, persons of different walks of life really taking a side. Of course, a lot of it had to do with government's decision and their legislation and their mandate, particularly after COVID-19. We saw where the tax was implemented as it pertains to money transfers, and that became a huge conversation that really broadened the gap between expats and local. A lot of persons didn't understand either side, but it was a very uncomfortable conversation, and we are happy to see. It might not be the end of it, but we're happy to see it, at least for now.
Ron, I think from years over, before 2020, this has been a conversation, and we've heard the mutters here and there. But I think this year, 2020, with all the pressures that we've been under with the novel coronavirus, lockdown, economic struggles, I think that pressure really pushed some of these issues to the forefront. As you said, it took on a life of its own, and we had some opinions and some conversations with some persons who can really speak to it. We spoke to previous Labor and Immigration Minister, Honorable past Dr. Kedrick Pickering, as well as Honorable Wheatley, who is also in the seat right now. There's been so much conversation, but we hope that we can continue to have the conversation, but in a more productive
and amicable way.
Most definitely. Now, as we move on with number 10, opposition legislator Alvaro Maduro Keynes. Yes, viewers, I think you know what's coming next. She joined the governing Virgin Islands Party on the same day that she tendered her resignation to the National Democratic Party. Now, Maduro Keynes, a former long-standing member of the NDP, made the announcement during a press conference with the Premier and VIP Chairman Andrew Foy, which is our Premier, on Monday, January 20th. She said, and I quote, "I tender my resignation from my former political party and have decided to join the VIP and become a member of the sitting government in the House of Assembly, and to pledge my support to Honorable Andrew A. Foy and his government in the furtherance of the vision of transforming the Virgin Islands into a leading regional economy and to the uplifting of Virgin Islanders across the region." Now, the new VIP member said Premier Andrew Foy earned her confidence in the past 11 months as the leader of his party and the leader of government business. Now, Ron,
this one definitely came as a shock to many persons.
This one came as a surprise. I remember sitting at work, and the press conference was very impromptu, and we were like, what's going on here? And I think even to this day, I think many constituencies of the 6th District and persons across the territory is still wondering why.
Well, why might be a question, but it happens all the time. We've seen the crossing of the floor many times. So I think in the final analysis, representatives do what they think is best for themselves, and being able to, let's just say, it's extremely difficult to be sitting on the opposition, and to be okay with being pushed aside or ignored. It's a lot easier to be on the winning team versus on the losing team.
That's true.
And I think at the end of the day, the Honorable Alvaro Maduro Keynes did what she thought was best.
Agreed.
Whether persons agree with it or not, or they're still wondering why or how, it is what it is.
Agreed. But what I will say, red or green, I think Honorable Keynes continue to stand with her constituents in the 6th
Yes,
electoral district. You can't take that away from her, and I'll give her that publicly.
Indeed. Continuing on number 9, former First Lady, the Reverend Idris O'Neill, passed away on May 24th at her home. Family members announced after what they described as an extended period of illness. Her passing came just 6 months after the death of her husband, the Honorable Ralph T. O'Neill, former Premier and Chief Minister. Mrs. Idris O'Neill was a holder of Her Majesty the Queen's prestigious award, Order of the British Empire, and was lauded for her exemplary work to community and church. Mrs. O'Neill was by far one of the pillars of the community, and she is continued to be missed to this day, the lovely Reverend Idris O'Neill. COVID-19, even in the aftermath of this year, we lost a lot of significant people.
We did.
Deaths that were not related to COVID-19, but it reminded me somewhat of 2017, the hurricanes of 2017, and the aftermath, where we just saw persons, just transitioning.
Right.
And this was definitely not only for the BVI, but for the VIP party. This was a woman who supported her husband as a stalwart member of the Virgin Islands Party, and I think the Virgin Islands Party definitely took a hit as they counted not only the loss of her husband the year before, but now in this year, the loss of Reverend Idris O'Neill.
Definitely a great loss to the BVI community. Now, as we move on with number 8, the traffic turnaround. Now, on June 15th was a historic day right here in the British Virgin Islands as the traffic turnaround went live. There were changes to the following areas: Waterfront Drive, the roundabout in Road Town, De Castro Street, Main Street, and Nib Street. Now, our Premier, Honorable Andrew A. Foy, said in response to the traffic turnaround, and I quote, "As a government, we are committed to the new regular, which means new ways of living and working in the Virgin Islands. We must do things differently to ensure new and positive results. I am pleased that Honorable Kai Reimer has been able to lead a comprehensive study on the traffic flows in the Road Town area and drive this important initiative that is expected to improve driver and pedestrian experiences on the road." Now, this project was a part of the government's efforts to make the capital of the Virgin Islands more pedestrian friendly and to reduce traffic congestion. Now, Ron, when this happened, I know a lot of persons were wondering, we're already going through so many changes.
Why now? Yeah.
We're in a new regular. Why now? But we see now, to this day, from June 15th to December, persons have adjusted.
I still ain't get accustomed to it, but I'm going to continue to just be cognizant while I'm on the road. Let me just say that.
And most definitely.
But we do see where the Honorable Kai Reimer really tried his best to revisit the city and how it looked and operated. And I think this is an ongoing process.
Right.
We see now where they're continuing to make signage and roadways and road marks more visible. So it's definitely something that we're going to have to continue to get used to.
I agree.
Indeed. Now on to number 7, the very daunting murders of 2020. In 2020, the Virgin Islands recorded 3 murders. On September 2nd, George Shawala Burrows was murdered in his residence in Purcell Estate. On October 14th, the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force charged Mr. Roden Sebastian with the murder of Mr. Burrows. Additionally, on September 10th, a male victim was found dead in the Spring Gut area. The body was what appeared to be from gunshot wounds. He was later identified as Mr. Matthew Daly. And most recently, on November 6th, Everton McMaster was shot in broad daylight in the Boggers Bay. He was still alive on the scene, but subsequently succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital. Kyla, the murders of 2020 definitely were extremely daunting.
Yeah.
These were 3 very prominent, well-known men, young men, I would consider, still with much life and excitement to give. But one of the daunting things that came about is all of these somehow seem connected to the 6th District. And by that I mean 2 of them were from the 6th District, and Mr. Daly, he had a business in the 6th District. And I think it really put perspective into crime and violence in our community, but it was absolutely daunting that we lost 3 of our male species to gun violence in the British Virgin Islands this year.
Very daunting, very heartbreaking with all that has been going on in 2020. No family should have had to deal with this. 2 of those murders was during curfew hours, and
the other in broad daylight.
In broad daylight, I think it's really been a crazy year, and we do want to wish the condolences to those families. Now, as we move on with number 6 on the list, $250 million in drugs found right here in the BVI. Now, Police Commissioner Mr. Michael Matthews and the Governor of the Virgin Islands, Augustus J.U. Jaspert, in a joint press conference divulged the details of a major drug bust. On Friday, 6th November, the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force conducted a covert operation due to a search warrant. The operation was carried out at a residence in the Bossum Gut area. Now, after searching the premises, a large quantity of illegal drugs and 2 illegal firearms were discovered. What was reported as the largest drug seizure in BVI history. The Royal Virgin Islands Police Force discovered 2,353 kilograms of cocaine. The drugs found had a conservative street value of $250 million. Now, subsequently, 2 persons were arrested. The 2 individuals were 2 brothers, Liston Davies, 40, and Darren Davies, 41. Now, Commissioner of Police Michael Matthews confirmed that Mr. Darren Davis was a serving police officer of the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force for over 20 years. The 2 brothers were charged with offenses of possession of a controlled drug with intent to supply in 3 counts each, and possession of a illegal firearm. But also, Ron, we will remember later on another police officer was also arrested and charged in connection with this drug bust. Definitely major news. In the BVI, it even hit international press, and it definitely, the BVI was not painted in a good light due to this drug bust.
Well, one of the things, Kala, is that 2020 saw, I would honestly say as a result of COVID-19, we saw where the Major Crimes Unit had a really tough time with drugs, and particularly the large amounts of quantity. The Honorable Julian Fraser, in a prior press conference, alluded to what we call the 3rd pillar, and it's something that we like to try to ignore here in the BVI, but as a result of COVID-19 and particularly our borders, it made it very difficult for persons who were involved in the drug business to be able to transport, whether it's to get rid of it or to receive it. And because of that, we saw where the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force was able to crack down on some really major cases. But not only that, 2020 saw a huge hit to the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force in really questioning, and persons already have the idea that they don't particularly care for police or law enforcement.
Or trust them.
And I think these 2 major drug busts really painted the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force in a bad light. We see where Commissioner Matthews, as well as the Governor, tried their best to reassure persons that they're still willing and able to serve, and Matthews vowed to continue to do his best to, really have a full agency. But at the end of the day, it was something that came about. It was a very daunting story.
I do agree. Now, as we move on in the countdown, on November 3rd, American airline pilots from Tortola, British Virgin Islands, were all able to fly together from Chicago to Charlotte. Now, Captain Kennard de Castro from Puzzle Estate and First Officer Alvin Lex Davies from Easton and First Officer Derek Romain Varlac from Boggles Bay. And I just want to say it. I want to say it in my dialect.
Of course, do you think
Estate, from Easton and from Boggles Bay. Yes, and I think it's just a proud
Indeed it
moment
was, yeah.
for the BVI. All sons of the soil to be flying together in the same pit, flying an airplane. It's amazing, amazing stuff. Now that moment was one of the proudest moments and most enjoyable moments of 2020, with the local pilots receiving best wishes and so much from local residents and leaders. I just think that this story shows our youth that you can go anywhere, literally.
It was by far one of the most encouraging stories of 2020 to see the BVI flag being flown and with so much pride, and to know that 3 locals were able to be together on the American flight to really just show the highest level of patriotism. I think it was remarkable, and we continue to wish all three local pilots the very best.
Agreed.
Continuing on, we are at number 4. On March 22nd, the government of the Virgin Islands closed the borders of the territory. No one in, no one out. All ports were closed to incoming travelers, including nationals, belongers, work permit holders, and residents. Now, the Virgin Islands government then took to apply a phased approach to the reopening of the borders, which really seemed to take forever. It felt like it was forever. Yes. On June 2nd, Phase 1 commenced, allowing the return of Virgin Islanders, belongers, and residents to travel to the territory. Phase 2 commenced on September 1st, allowing more categories of residents than included work permit holders. And Phase 3, also in the border reopening process, commenced on December 1st with the return of the tourism product and tourists coming back to the territory. Kyla, a major story. It caused a lot of pandemic, a lot of fright. It was just a major frenzy. Persons trying to get to the supermarket, those trying to get out. Persons have been out of the territory for a very long time just because many of them were not certain of how it would go. But I think it was a necessary step when it comes to securing our borders. And I can honestly say that had the government of the Virgin Islands not moved to close the borders at the time that they had, it could have been a lot worse.
A lot worse. And I do remember, if you remember, Ron, I remember we were talking about that local versus expat conversation and work permit holders being in the second phase. I remember that was a bit of a ticklish situation with basically talking about work permit holders who've been here working and contributing to the BVI being locked out until September, a very long time. But yeah, that was a major developing story for 2020. Now, as we move on, what number are we on now?
We're on number 3.
We're on number 3, viewers. Now, the first COVID-19 cases confirmed in the BVI. If you remember, viewers, on March 25th, 2020, the territory of the Virgin Islands confirmed its first 2 cases of COVID-19. The 2 patients were male residents that traveled back to the territory from high-risk countries. Therefore, the cases were classified as imported. And Ron, I think really and truly, that's where it all started.
That's where it all started. And it was a back and forth battle, I think, when it came to the confirmed cases. They're imported, yes, but very easily, the unfortunate part about this particular story is that we very easily, as a society and a territory, wanted to cast blame on making someone responsible for the ills or the lack of urgency. I think, in all honesty, the government of the Virgin Islands, in many cases, as we came to border protection and border patrol, very easily cast the blame on persons who were illegally smuggling.
Right.
And one of the things that we did not highlight or did not seemingly prepare for is persons are going to break the rules if and when they can. So it's not something that you could try to say it's not going to happen. What you needed to do was to prepare for if and when it happens, this is what we're going to do. Yes.
I think COVID-19 really tests some of our systems here in the BVI. It brought up some major aspects that we know were a problem. We know border protection was an issue in the BVI, but COVID really blew it up, and we saw it for what it really was.
Indeed. And number 2, a very daunting and not the most positive story. In April of this year, the BVI saw its first COVID-19 death as preliminary test results for COVID-19 in this patient returned positive and were further verified by CAPRA. Now, shockwaves literally went through the territory, sending residents into a frenzy. The victim, a 52-year-old female Filipino resident, succumbed to the symptoms of her illness on the morning of April 18. Premier and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Andrew A. Foy, offered his condolences to the family and loved ones of the deceased. We saw Kyla at our number 2 story where the BVI had its first and only death as a result of COVID-19. But this was a very painful time for the territory for a number of reasons. Persons were uncertain. They did not know what to say, what to expect. Of course, most importantly, someone lost a mother, someone lost a wife, a friend, a sister. But one of the things that transpired as a result of this story is, again, the war on expats. Persons were very quick to blame a community for putting others at risk, when in fact, the war on the BVI Health Services Authority actually increased, because when the details finally came out, it showed that this person questioned and really did their best. The family really did their best in making sure and followed protocols, really did their best in trying to make sure that they could get her the best assistance. So it really questioned the BVI's Health Services Authority and their ability as an agency to combat that, and I think a lot of persons in the territory at that particular time lost a little bit of trust in them.
Agreed.
But also one of the most daunting allegations from the husband and family that they recalled the countless times they tried to seek medical help, and in the final analysis, the heartbreaking story of a husband trying to grieve and bury his wife, but instead was faced with countless back and forth by not only government officials, but funeral home directors. It was a painful story, one which we wish we would not have to report on, but it was a just absolutely painful time.
Definitely a painful time in the BVI. So much things came out of it. I think just in general at that time in 2020, we were very fearful. And I think when persons are fearful, some really bad things happen. And I think as we report and continue to report on COVID-19 statistics and the epidemiology report, that one debt is always so hard to digest. It's just a lingering something. And we do want to wish condolences to that family, because they do matter. But also we are happy that we didn't have to move on from that one.
Yes.
We didn't have any more. We learned from our mistakes, I would hope, and we are moving forward.
Well said.
Now, viewers, number 1. Now, we're talking about COVID-19 lockdowns and curfews. Now, on a Friday, March 27th, I remember it like it was just last week, viewers. The Virgin Islands went into a 24-hour lockdown. The first lockdown was just imposed for 6 days in the first instance, but the people of the Virgin Islands saw numerous extensions after and really and truly after that, it probably led to maybe an entire month of a 24-hour lockdown. Now, during that time, persons were allowed to access essential services for just a few days, and the government of the Virgin Islands also assisted by providing care packages to the residents. But as it pertains to lockdowns and curfew, it's been a long road here in the BVI.
We were back up for a long time. we were stuck inside for a long time.
So viewers, you can basically said for 2020 we will back up.
Yeah, we were, but it was necessary.
They didn't leave us outside at all. Come home, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, but you know, even up to this day, we are still on curfew, but we're happy.
Again, it was necessary, and I think it was also necessary for residents of the Virgin Islands to experience. The hurricanes of 2017 were one thing, but having to be confined to homes. And this lockdown, it brought out a lot of positive. We saw persons going back to the gardens and opening their backyard gardens. We saw beautiful virtual programs, Brent Hoyt, and praise parties. We saw persons really bringing their talent to the forefront, because as a community, we were forced to stay inside, but still be relevant and to still stay active. We saw families coming together. Unfortunately, we saw a lot of domestic violent situations as well. But the lockdowns were tough, but they were necessary.
Ron, I like how you tried to sweet it up like that, but I know
best.
a lot of viewers out there is like, no, I don't care what you say, Ron. I'm not going back. I'm not going back.
Well, the only way we could not go back in this COVID era, viewers, is if we continue to follow the protocols and do what we're supposed to do, and really adhere and take our health seriously, the health of others. That's the only way we could not experience another lockdown like we did.
I do agree. But viewers, that was our top 15. And don't get us wrong, so much has happened in 2020. But that was our top 15 local stories for 2020. Now, the new year is upon us.
Yes.
And viewers, it's been a good year. We're definitely happy to been able to bring you your local, regional, and international content all year long. Even when you were in lockdown, we were here and basically riding the wave and bringing you that information. But it is always our pleasure.
Indeed, and we continue to wish you the best this season. It's always a pleasure, and we thank you so much for sticking with us. On behalf of our team here at 284 Media, I'd like to thank each of you for continuing to support us. We wish you the very best in 2021. Whatever happens, whatever takes place, we're going to be here bringing you the daily happenings, both locally, regionally, and international content, honest and impartial news out of Tortola in the beautiful British Virgin Islands. It is the end of an era, and this was your top 15 local stories here in the British Virgin Islands. We thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
Most definitely. Bye.